to A Well-Designed Business. My name is LuAnn, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hi, welcome to A Well-Designed Business. It's Power Talk Friday. Braden Drake, a California tax attorney, is with us today. Braden specializes in helping creatives understand the ins and outs of all the fun, legal and tax topics in our business that we love to pretend don't exist. Through his podcast, blog, and online courses, Braden brings small business owners education on contracts, business entities, cash flow, systems, and taxes. Today, I'm going to pick Braden's brain about how to protect our businesses, what we need to know about LLCs and S Corps, and how to know if your CPA is doing a good job or not. Looking forward to sharing this interview with you. Hi, Braden. Thanks so much for joining me on A Well-Designed Business today.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
So, Braden, like I've already, told you 3 times in I think 10 minutes, I adore your website.
Thank you.
Honestly, I am encouraging all of you to go over to Braden's website, Braden, Braden, Drake.com. And here's why. We're going to talk about Braden's superpower, which is that he's a lawyer who is also a tax. What are you? Are you a lawyer and an accountant, or are you just a tax specialist?
I'm a tax attorney, technically.
Tax attorney. Okay. So the thing is, that's what we're going to talk about here, because he's got some, great ideas and tips and things, for all of us so that we don't make, crazy mistakes in our business. But what I love is the way his website is so here's the thing. I was about to say it's so him. I know him 10 minutes and, I really know it's him? But what I'm saying is we talk about on the show all the time, and I cannot let this go by, is you have to be you, because when you're you, somebody will say, that's the kind of tax attorney I want to work with. And you know what? I'm sure there's a gabillion somebodies that are like, are you kidding me? He's not serious enough. I am not going to give him control of my money, right? But that's to me, I'm just like, oh, this is the kind of that's why I love Jamie Lieberman. She's my lawyer. And it's the same thing. She's just so you're just normal and just cool and hip and all the things. And you just know it's not going to be uptight. And so I adore this. All right. And so I wanted to just ask you, you said you have a section on your website where you talk about why you like to work with creatives. You're in this straight up buttoned up, role as a tax attorney, but you love working with creatives. Would you share us a little bit about that story, Braden?
Sure. So it was funny, growing up, I used to spend a lot of time with my grandfather, who's since passed, but he was a big idol of mine. And whenever I would go to my grandparents' house, we would watch HGTV together. And he would always tell me, I think you're going to be like a designer, when you get older. And then everyone else in my family said they thought I was going to be an attorney, because I like to argue a lot. That's the joke, right? But I got in college. I tried my hand at photography for a hot minute. I bought a DSLR, never learned how to use the thing. I tried to teach myself how to knit. I made one scarf that was full of holes. So I kind of joke that while I do consider myself to be a creative, it's more of a hobby of mine. Whereas I found that law, tax, these more, quote unquote buttoned up professions, whatever that means, was more of my calling. But I like to work with creatives because in a way it helps me kind of dip my toes into the industry that I don't really feel like I'm fully qualified to be a part of, to be honest.
I love it. It's just so fun. And you guys have got to read the website copy, because it is a lesson in how to really. We had a show recently with Lisa Princek, and she talked about identifying your value proposition. And we have for many years on the show, Braden talked about our Fred Burns only. Fred Burns came on the show several times, and he talked about what's the thing that only you do. What is the way that only you do it? And the way you present yourself on your website is such a shining example of, you're the only tax attorney that really still knows how to have a good time. Like, that's what I'm saying.
Well, thank you. I had a website designer and marketing coach who she emailed me after the fact and told me that she did a screen share of my website when she presented to a conference room full of QuickBooks certified accountants and bookkeepers. Yeah. And I was like, that was the best compliment. So I'm sure they all probably thought I was wacky and nuts, but for my audience, they love it. So that's all that matters.
Well, and it's good. And the thing is too, because we've learned with, having Peter Lang, the designer CPA, the design business is very different. The business itself is so different than, your typical product-based business where, you stock up ice cream and you sell ice cream cones, right? Like, it's very different. And then creatives are different. We come to business differently. And a lot of times we come to our business because of our passion, not because of our expertise in business. And so then when we go to look for professionals to support us in our business, I have found for myself, they need to speak my language. Like, if you are going to talk to me, like the way our CPA talks to Vinny, my husband, is one way, and the way that Patty and Frank, our CPAs, talk to me is different. And sometimes, they'll talk in the regular way, and I'm like, no. See, that just went over my head. Like roll that back. The Vin man's not in the room. Break it down, And what I've learned is, it's not that I'm not capable of grasping the concepts, but if my brain fires differently than, an analytical brain like my husband's, then you just have to come at it differently with me, because I can get there. And I think, do you find that with creatives, Braden, that, we're not smart. We just really process things differently.
Yeah, and really a lot of it is just industry language and lingo, right? So we all have these definitions for things. You have the same thing in the design industry. You're going to use one set of language and terms with your colleagues, and you're going to use a different set of terms with your clients, right? So same thing for us. I just find that a lot of attorneys and tax professionals, they spend so much time with their own people that they don't really learn how to speak to people outside of their profession. I often kind of joke that I've disconnected myself so much from my own industry that I've forgotten how to speak like a real lawyer. It's like a joke that I have, but that benefits me a lot. Like when I'm talking to potential clients, whether it be, at a speaking event, a podcast, or like on my student calls.
Right. I love it. I love it. Now, you do have a lot of different ways that you do help creatives decipher this end of their business and support them. So you have a signature program. It's called Unf Your Biz, right? You have your podcast, also called Unf Your Biz. And of course, I'm, saying it politely here because my show is G-rated. But, you point out that there are some common mistakes that you have seen in, like you said, the students that you teach and the clients that you have that we make, and probably any business owner, right? Not just creatives, but some of them are not using our contracts, not having insurance, not paying our quarterly taxes or filing on time, forming an LLC in the wrong state. When do we be an LLC? When do we be an S Corp? So start us off. What are some of the things, like what's something you want to start with and really say, you know what, this is a big thing I see, and let's get this on the table.
Yeah, so one concept I like to teach, I call it the layers of protection for your creative business, or just the layers of protection for short. And I tell people to think about legal protection like they would layers of clothing. And the amount of layers that you need are dependent on whether you're like a hot person or a cold person, where you live, what the season is, all this kind of stuff. So if you're cold by nature and you're from California and you go to Minnesota in the wintertime, you're going to really, really bundle up. So Each layer provides a different function and purpose. A hat keeps your ears warm, socks keep your feet warm, very, very obvious stuff. But together, they create all of the layers that you need to protect yourself. So, the primary layers for most businesses, from a legal perspective, I say are insurance, contracts, and LLCs. They all three provide a very distinct purpose, and you need all three of them to layer onto your business. So, a big mistake is just missing one of those components.
So missing one of those isn't about being cold in Minnesota. It's about being naked anywhere, right?
Yes, 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 exactly.
Like these are the non-negotiables. You have to have your tighty whities on and a t-shirt, right? So this is the insurance, the contracts, and the LLCs. And so I don't know that we've had a lot of conversation about insurances on the show. Is there a little quick rundown on the types of non-negotiable insurances that a business owner should have, Braden?
Sure. So I myself am not an insurance agent. I do interview one on my podcast, but through talking to agents, I can share quite a bit of secondhand information. The general thing is you need to have both general liability insurance, especially in the design business. You're inside people's homes, you're doing all kind of stuff. And that is going to protect you in case anyone gets injured, right? So you need that. And then you also need professional liability insurance. So this is also often called errors and emissions insurance, and that's going to protect you if you have any kind of mistakes that you make. It's the equivalent to like malpractice insurance for doctors and lawyers. So you want both of those. And the main thing I always say is find an agent who understands your industry. Talk to them about the type of scopes of work that you do, how much you're charging your clients, what kind of risk you have involved. And if they're knowledgeable enough about your industry, they should be able to ask you the necessary questions to get you the coverage you need.
Love it. That is the key right there, is somebody that understands your industry, the industry that we're in, and it's because if they don't know what they don't know, here you are. There's two people that don't know what they don't know. The person who is an interior designer, hello, not an insurance expert, and the insurance expert that doesn't know the industry well enough to say, hey, what about this? Or we need that, right?
Yeah, so in the legal field, we actually call this issue spotting. This is the key to the bar exam. Fun sidebar for everyone. And what happens is this, we can see this all over the place in society, is the less you know, oftentimes the more confident you are because you're like, I'm nailing it. But you're actually not seeing the 15 different problems that they're testing you on in this essay. So we call it issue spotting. You have to find someone who's knowledgeable enough to spot what the potential problems are to then help you solve them.
Love it. I love it. And of course, we have that in our industry, right? It's like we are expected to be the person, that sees that, hey, we're going to specify rough-in plumbing for 16 shower heads in your, primary bath, but who told the plumber to put the roughing for that, or the valves in for that, because they thought there was going to be one shower head, and that's a big difference. And the tile is all done, and it's all done, and everybody's looking like, well, why did you specify 16 shower heads if you didn't tell anybody in construction to account for that, right? So that's that same thing. I love that phrase, issue spotting. Very clear. I like it.
Yeah, this is like when I worked at West Elm, we'd have people come in all the time, and they would just need to buy off the shelf curtains. And naturally, they would just measure from the top of their window to the floor. And I myself was not a designer. So when I started there, I was like, yeah, that's fine. And then, of course, it was usually the kids who were in design school were like, no. We got to, measure above. That's not where we want to put them. So there's stuff that your clients are definitely not thinking about. And then there's those things that are probably really obvious to you as well.
Yeah, I love it. That's so good. And of course, you're talking my language with curtains, that's for sure. So, okay. So now some of the other things is, forming an LLC in the wrong state. What is that about? And then forming a single member rather than a multi-member. Well, give us a little lowdown on those things, Braden.
Yeah, so this is it's pretty straightforward. Most states require you to register your LLC in the state if you're working there. So what often happens is people hear that Delaware is the place to be, or Wyoming or Nevada. Those tend to be the big three. If you go read a bunch of stuff on the internet. So people are like, oh, okay, I'm going to form my LLC in Wyoming, but I have a business in New Jersey. Well, New Jersey's going to say, you operate here. We need you to also register your LLC here. And then you're paying all the same taxes and fees that you would if you just registered there in the first place. So now you have all these obligations in two different states. In short, the only time you want to really do like forum picking or deciding where you want to form your LLC is if you have owners all over the place, or if you're like Amazon or Walmart and you have business nexus in every single state. Most of us don't have that. We just want to form in our home state. Keep it simple.
Now that's interesting. So what you're saying is there are people, business owners, unknowingly would find a tidbit of information that says that, for example, like you said, Delaware is favorable for XYZ. So they live in whatever random state and they think that they can make the LLC in Delaware and that's kosher. That's weird. I wouldn't have thought that. Does seem so illogical to me.
Yeah, it's because some states have really low filing fees. Delaware, in particular, have courts that are very favorable to large business. So a lot of the big companies file there so that they can hopefully drag all their lawsuits to that state if they get sued. Most of that's not really relevant to most of us. What people don't realize is the we call it a foreign corporation, which is kind of a misnomer of a name. But if you form in one state and you're operating in a different state, the state in which you operate is going to say, well, you are a foreign corporation formed in a different state operating here, so we need you to register. And we don't want to do that if we don't have to.
So, what about, for example, I know that we have several firms that have two scenarios. One scenario is, for example, there's actually a physical office in, say, Colorado, or let's think, I'm thinking of Pope Design Studio. They have a physical office, I think it's Seattle, and also in Texas, okay? And then I'm thinking of designers like Sandra Funk at House of Funk that now reside in Tennessee, but for the last 20 years resided in New Jersey and maintains staff in New Jersey, even though everybody is remote. So what's the difference and the similarities in these types of situations as it relates to, taxes and, declaring entities and things like that?
Sure. So just for purposes of the LLC, these two scenarios are probably going to be the same, because most states really just have the rule that if you are doing business in that state, and that usually has to do with your physical work location. So if you work from home, you have a home office, that's a physical work location. You have employees in the other state, that's a physical work location. Of course, like any good attorney, I'm going to tell you check your state rule because they're all different, but to be honest, they're mostly the same, right? So that's the broad general guidance. Now, I do want to note that that's really just for purposes of registering your LLC and paying those fees. Your income taxes, in which states you pay income tax to, that's going to have more to do with the domicile or the residence of the person who owns the business. So if you have employees in New York or in another state, you might have tax filing obligations there, but more likely than not, you're going to end up paying your state income taxes to the state in which you are personally based out of, if you solely own the business.
Okay. So, and then if we are a designer who is based in one location, but we get invited to do business in multiple locations across the U.S., this only probably affects us when it comes to sales tax and things like that, but it doesn't affect us when it comes to our corporation taxes and our personal taxes, because you're saying that's all domicile based.
Yeah, so if people have started to dig into sales tax, they probably heard the term nexus, and nexus really is just a fancy word for connection. Like, what kind of connection do you have to that state? Some states do have nexus rules with regard to income tax. I'm going to tell you, though, that like the vast majority of taxpayers are not even aware of those. Like, they don't even really look at them. Most of the time, if you have like one client in another state, we're probably not going to worry about it for income tax purposes. But, if you have like family in Chicago and they have a lot of connections and they somehow drum up like 30% of your business revenue in that state, even though you don't live there, now let's talk to our accountant about it and say, I'm doing quite a bit of work here. Do I need to worry about any kind of income tax stuff?
Okay. So that's a good point, because what happens is sometimes it just starts with one project, and then the next thing you know, Susie tells Sally and Sally tells, whoever, and then here you are. You've got 3, 4, 5, or 6 projects in an area that might be out of your primary space. And so what you're saying is, if this starts to happen, just make sure you bring it to the attention of your CPA. Is that who we're bringing it to the attention of, Braden?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
because they're gonna, if they're filing your income tax returns, then they're gonna need to look and see if they have any filing requirements in those other states.
Okay. Okay. Makes sense. All right. And then, and here's the thing, that's the type of thing where the CPA might not know to ask that. That issue spotting might not apply there, right? Because if the CPA is just looking at dollars on a ledger sheet, they're not necessarily looking at the address of the client. So this is where we can't be asleep at the wheel once we've started to maybe develop a little following in another state, right?
Yeah, and I would even keep it as simple as telling them, last year I had 20 clients in my home state, I had 3 clients in this state, and then I had 10 clients in this other state. Do we need to look into this? And then they might ask you, okay, can you tell me about the revenue in each state? Or they might tell you it's irrelevant. It doesn't even really matter.
Okay.
So I wouldn't like break it down too much until they need all those kind of specifics.
Okay.
Unless you truly are operating like 50-50 in like 2 different places kind of thing.
Okay. But again, I for me, I'm just hammering it home to all of our colleagues that this is where we have to be proactive. We can't make an assumption someone is going to ask us, hey, by the way, did you have any clients out of state last year?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Love it. Okay, good. And then, it's funny because some of us are S Corps and some of us are LLCs, and we have had conversations a little bit about it before, but you give us your slant on if I'm a brand new business and if maybe I'm a business that might be 3 or 5 or 10 years in, do I have to, if I started 10 years ago and I was an LLC, is it good enough to stay an LLC, or is there any point where I should be thinking about changing my entity?
So the answer, of course, is maybe. It's all dependent on, it's all dependent on income, right? So the first big note I like to give everyone is that an S Corp is not actually a type of entity. So when we're talking about business entities, we really have LLCs, corporations. There are a few other ones, but those are the primary 2. An S Corp is really just a tax status is what we call it. So you say, hey IRS, you wrote subchapter S of the tax code. I want to take advantage of that. And I would like for my LLC or my corporation, either one, to file taxes, quote unquote, as an S Corp. I always joke that if it were up to me, we would call them SLLCs or S corporations because that makes more sense, but I don't really have the time for that marketing campaign right now. So
you can't change City Hall, right?
Right. I can't change like industry lingo across the nation just yet. So really, you form an LLC. Most often, that's going to be your first step for the liability protection. And then once you're profiting enough money and an S corporation makes sense, you file an election. It's IRS Form 2553, if anyone wants to Google that. And you just send that to the IRS within the first couple months of the year in which you want to make it effective. And you say, hey there, now I would like to start being an S corporation for tax purposes.
And what's that criteria? So you said it's not amount. I hear you now. It's not how many years you're in business. It's that when you start to approach a certain gross revenue that you need to give that a thought and have a conversation.
Right. Yeah. So for some people, that could be year 1. If you already, for some reason have a book of business, maybe you're leaving a company, clients are going with you, that kind of thing. But the key is you have to pay yourself a reasonable salary. Naturally, this begs the question, what's a reasonable salary? That could be a whole podcast episode. But typically from the IRS perspective, a reasonable salary would be, okay, what does an interior designer like in New Jersey expect to make if they have about 10 years of experience? So it's, time in the industry, expertise, all that kind of stuff. So if we did an analysis and determined your reasonable salary is $60,000, $80,000, well, at a minimum, you have to be profiting enough money in your business to actually pay that as a salary through a payroll provider. And then you want to have enough profit above and beyond that to make the savings make sense. Because the way that S Corp actually works is that we save self-employment taxes on whatever profit we have in the business that's not salary.
Okay. So what we're saying is that whether I'm starting out day 1 with the expectation or I've evolved and grown my business, the evaluation becomes one, if the reasonable salary for my industry, my role, my position, my job, my career, whatever, my business, in my state is 80K, then if I'm going to make enough to pay myself 80K and run the business and have $1 left over, then I probably should be filing as an S Corp, because that's going to be the best financial tax thing to do. Whereas if I'm, the reasonable expectation of the salary is still 80K, but if I just open this year and I'm looking at my prospects for getting my business off the ground, if my CPA and my attorney are looking at me saying, well, do you have anybody past your mother and your sister? You're kind of like, not yet, I'm going to build it. Then it's like, okay, you can do an LLC, because we don't know that you're even going to make 80K to give yourself yet. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, so we're almost all the way there. I would just edit to say that you want your profit to be $20,000 to $30,000 more than your reasonable salary. So if you want, we can break this down with like a simple math example. Do you want to do that?
If you can do a simple math example, I will kiss you. So go ahead.
Okay. So let's assume normally I would say $130,000 in revenue, $100,000 in profit. But since we're talking to designers, I'm going to double the revenue. So let's say your business makes $200,000 and your profit is $100,000. So you're operating at a 50% profit under this hypothetical. And we do the research and determine that your reasonable salary needs to be $70,000. So you have $100,000 in profit. You have to pay yourself a salary of $70,000. That $70,000 is subject to both self-employment taxes and income taxes. And self-employment taxes are share of Medicare and Social Security taxes, 15.3%. The other $30,000 of profit you have above and beyond your salary is only subject to income taxes, not self-employment taxes. So we save 15.3% tax on the $30,000. And the reason why we say you want to profit at least $20,000 to $30,000 above your salary is because that's where the S Corp savings is going to start to outweigh the additional cost that you might incur due to forming an S Corp.
Okay. I got that. I did get that. So, okay. And so what we're saying in there is, now, like, here's what I want to know. There are situations where business owners, designers are out there not taking the reasonable salary. Like I've talked to them and I've literally said, what do you pay yourself? Oh, I pay myself, $35,000 a year. Meanwhile, the business has more money and could give them a better salary. But there's a fear, well, what if I take it and then I need it or whatever like that? And I always get upset because I'm like, if you're going to make $40,000 or $50,000, why don't you just go work for somebody? Because your skill set, you could probably make 80, working for somebody, right? So that's a problem of mindset. But what happens if a business owner is out there now and is dramatically underpaying themselves based on reasonable salary that the state is going to determine and the business can afford it? Like, they're just going to end up paying way more taxes on it and not have gotten the money? Like, what's the ramification on doing that?
Well, so this happens for a few reasons. It happens, one, because of mindset issues or because people just don't want to pay themselves enough money. So that's a cash flow problem. I could talk about cash flow all day. I love to talk about money. The second problem is that based on the math example I gave, if we really dig into it, we realize the lower our salary is, the more we save on taxes. So some people will intentionally pay themselves a really low salary in an S Corp to save more. Now, this creates inherent risk with the IRS. If you get audited, you might be in trouble, right? If we don't have an S Corp, we still want to pay ourselves on a regular basis, but we don't necessarily have a legal obligation to do that. It's just, like, we need to make money, right? It's just a smart thing to do. When it comes to the S Corp, what happens is if you got audited and you only paid yourself a salary of $30,000, then you're going to have an argument with the IRS about what your reasonable salary should be. And if they determine it should be $60,000, well, now you have $30,000 of additional salary that you didn't pay, and they're going to want the payroll taxes on that salary that they didn't get to begin with. So that becomes an argument down the road. And this is why when we determine a reasonable salary, you want to document it. So you want to say, this is the research that we did. This is how we came up with the number. And then you just save that somewhere on your computer. If down the road you ever have a conversation with the IRS, you can say, this is how we justified the number. And in that case, they might disagree with you on some of those like leverage levers that you pulled, but it's going to be more of a conversation of like a $10,000 difference rather than I underpaid myself by 50% kind of thing.
Okay. And then the other wild card in all of this, when you're an S Corp, and correct me because maybe I'm not correct, is if you have a spouse, their income doesn't that affect it, or is it only if you have another S corp? And I'm asking because my CPA and I are constantly talking about like, well, what's the pass through income at WindowWorks? What's the pass through income for Vin and Lou over here? And what's the pass? So it's always about what's the pass through income, and I'm just like, wow. But I feel like I'm consistently having to figure out what the salary needs to be out of one business because of what's happening with income from another business. And is that only the case for me, Braden, because I'm an officer in both businesses? Or if I was an officer in this business and not in the other business, but my husband, or for anybody listening, their husband or their wife, their partner has a separate business, is that not pass-through income?
It could be a number. It could be a whole host of things. I will say just the fact that you're having those conversations with your CPA tells me that you have a really good CPA and they're actually taking the time to make custom suggestions for you. The salary nuances can be a lot, right? So my husband, he is prosecutor with our district attorney's office. He has a set salary. It's a whole different thing. So the way we have to look at it is that when it comes to our taxes, most of us are going to do married filing jointly if we are married, and the IRS taxes us on our whole like pool of money that we make. So it's based on your household income, right? So a spouse's income, this happens pretty often. I'll give you a personal example. My husband is 10 years older than I am. So when I started my business, I had like 0 clients, but I was married to someone who'd already been an attorney for 10 years. So I was paying a lot more in taxes than someone else who just started their business unmarried would, because it was based on our household income, right?
Right.
When it comes to all these different kind of things you're considering with your CPA, there's a new tax benefit called the Qualified Business Income Deduction, or QBI. And that, when you have an S Corp, it reduces your QBI deduction. So a lot of these are just offsetting mechanisms. So you save more in self-employment tax with the S Corp, you get less of a QBI deduction. And for a lot of people, without getting into the weeds, because we really probably couldn't do that in audio format anyway, there's like a sweet spot. There's like a magic number where you want your salary to be to optimize like both of those numbers. So there's a lot of that going on. And when you have another spouse who owns a business, or if you're a partner in that business, then it's a lot of moving parts and variables as to what your pass-through income is in all of those different avenues.
Well, and again, I think what we're saying, the bottom line is that if you're an interior designer and you are the owner of your business and you're working with a CPA, and I guess the thing is, if they're not doing like our CPA is doing, if your spouse has another business, or even like in your case was established as, with and earning more money than you were, it has to be part of that conversation. And like, your reaction was, oh, you have a really good CPA. But I want everybody to have a really good CPA, right? I want everybody's CPA to say, hey, what are all the moving parts that I should know about so that I can help you make the best decisions? And it's not just a decision. And it's funny because in our particular case, our CPA, I've said it a million times, my husband and Frank went to high school together. They're in their 70s. Okay. This is a long time. And he's been my husband's CPA for every business he's had. I think he's on his 5th business at this point. Right. And so when I, created my own entity over here, it was funny because I had to literally call out Frank, good friend, a couple of times. I'm like, Frank, I keep hearing you process this through the lens of Vinny and LuAnn and WindowWorks. I need a little processing through the lens of LuAnn Niagara Inc. Like, ultimately, I want you to have the back of all of us, right? LuAnn and Vinny as personal people, WindowWorks as a corporation, and LuAnn Niagara. It can't be, oh, and by the way, over there, just do that. And he was like, it took him a while, but I did what I encourage my colleagues to do. I kept being the greasy the squeaky wheel. I kept saying, Frank, buddy, over here. Remember LuAnn over here? Remember LuAnn over here?
Yeah, sometimes that's what you have to do, right? And another thing I'll tell people is with everything else, right? You see it in the design space, it happens in the accounting space. You get what you pay for, right? So a lot of CPAs, I would say even most CPAs that focus on taxes, they have a churn and burn business model. So they charge $1,000, $1,500 for the tax return. That doesn't really include any consulting. So this is where I hear complaints from people all the time. My accountant doesn't talk to me. They don't answer my questions. They don't explain anything. And I tell them, I said, well, to be frank with you, is that what you're paying for? Are you paying for consulting services? Most accountants who are providing the kind of level of service you're talking about are going to charge $1,500, to $5,000 for a tax return. And then they might have a monthly service fee on top of that where they give you the consulting that you need to make decisions on a quarterly basis to maximize your tax benefits. So if you want to really get some custom solutions, you're going to want to look for a CPA who's providing that level of service.
And you know what? I'm so glad you said that, because it is true. You can't expect them to do it at no charge. They're professionals, just like you're a lawyer, like our designers are professional designers. But it's like working with a designer and saying, just pick the paint, I'll figure out the furniture. It's like, no. Right. The whole thing has to happen together, right? And so, and for me, I'm glad that you pointed it out, because yes, we do pay more for that full service, but I can't imagine running the businesses without the opportunity for that consultation aspect of it, to just show up and here's the taxes that they've been done and the filing and the quarterly stuff without the conversation is beyond. I mean, I don't know the first thing about it. I need you to tell me all about it, right?
Yeah, and this is where a lot of people are not at the level where they feel like they can hire that out. And this is what confuses people a lot about my business model is I don't do tax prep. Right. I'm to the point where I don't do a lot of one-on-one legal work either. I have mostly a course and a membership, but my business model provides education to kind of serve all of the people until they're at the point where they're ready to go hire the CPA for that high level of service, which for me, I usually tell people once you're at about $200,000 in revenue, then we need to find someone really highly qualified to help you. Once you're working your way towards that, as long as you're not, you don't own like rental properties and you don't own multiple businesses, if it's just you and your business and your spouse has a W-2 kind of thing, then a lot of it's pretty simple and we can get you there like through education and support in that manner.
Interesting. So you have found that up to about $200K gross revenue with the right information, which is a lot what you provide, you can manage this yourself pretty successfully. I mean, you're still going to have your CPA do your filing and stuff, but you don't necessarily need that consultative arm of it just yet.
Right. Yeah. Because a lot of the complex guidance comes down to, well, does your business own assets that you need to depreciate? Do you own land? Do you own vehicles? Is your spouse a part of the business? If no, that simplifies things a lot. So usually there are kind of these question marks I always have in the back of my head of, can you do this on your own? If you're answering yes to some of these questions, then maybe you need to go get someone for some one-on-one guidance. But for the rest of us, it's, form an LLC, trigger the S Corp when it's the right time for you. Make sure you're doing your bookkeeping, tracking your expenses, all that kind of stuff. You have a good contract. If you have that, you're pretty good up until the point where you're getting at an income level where we need to consider some more advanced strategies.
Right. Love it. I love it. And in the role of everything, it's so funny because I keep almost forgetting that you're not a CPA and that you're a tax attorney, right? Because, what the whole conversation is about the entities and the taxes and all of that. So I understand you just said that you're not necessarily, the bulk of your practice is not actually practicing as a tax attorney any longer, but where does a tax attorney fall into all of this in the normal way?
Yeah, so tax attorneys, there's a few different roles, right? So there's the whole scope and area that we call tax controversy. And that's basically, I have back taxes or the IRS is sending me hate mail, like, please help me. That's what tax controversy attorneys do. They go to tax court, all that stuff. And then you have attorneys that work in tax planning. So they're typically in private law firms. They bill, $500 an hour and up, and they typically will work with high net worth clients or businesses. And sometimes when I started my business, I had a couple of CPAs who paid me an hourly rate to do tax research for them. So they would say, we want to take this tax position, we want to take this deduction, we want you to research the case law on other people who've taken a similar deduction and won against the IRS, so to speak, so that we can back up this claim when we file this tax return. So that's typically what a tax attorney would do. They work very closely with CPAs oftentimes.
Interesting. Okay, good. And then so now your business is focused on educating creatives. So to your point that they can, kind of start out the gate with a good foundation, right? Until they grow their business to the point that they actually need the professionals on their team. Tell us a little bit about that, the way you do that, the program that you have, because I'm intrigued about that type of, what is it that you can teach us that we don't necessarily have to go out and hire for? That's what's interesting to me.
Sure. So I'm actually launching a new program this fall. I have not announced the name of it anywhere. I don't know when this episode's coming out yet, but I'll go ahead and share it with your audience. This is kind of tentative, so if I launch under a new name, don't hold me to this. I still have to file the trademark, all that stuff. But the name of the new program is going to be called The Profit RX. Insert catchy tagline of like the prescription to build a healthy, wealthy business with solid legal and tax foundation, something like that. But I'm basically taking the core curriculum from my past program. And what we do is I start with a module just called Learn, where I teach you, I call it the class that we all should have had in high school on taxes. How do income taxes work? What's the difference between business deduction and itemized deduction and an adjustment? And like, why do you actually need to know these things? Well, it's so that we don't spend our money on like stupid stuff thinking we're going to get a deduction. So this gives you important background information. And then we look at your business income and determine which business entity is right for you. If people are in the program and they want to do an LLC, I do something called an LLC filing party where we all form our LLCs together on Zoom. It's very fun. It's actually very easy.
You're in that.
Yeah. And then I give all the contract templates that people need. So I've had a template shop in the past. I provide the templates inside of the program. Our S Corp people elect their S Corps. We get them on payroll through Gusto. I have training videos to set all that up. And then we actually get now into personal finance and some more advanced tax strategies as well. So one thing that drives me bonkers is when people will open like 16 retirement accounts before they even start paying quarterly taxes. And it's like, no, we got to get your business cash flow right first. Just make sure you're profitable. You need to pay yourself. You need to pay your taxes. And now, once you're actually paying yourself, we can do a 401k match if you're employed, open a Roth IRA if you qualify. And then once you're to that step, we look at, okay, let's go talk to a certified financial planner about the next best step based on your personal finance situation. So it's all encompassing really with personal finance, law, and tax to get the foundations of your business in order.
I love it. Now, I have the answer in my head to the question I want to ask you, but I want to hear what you say. Why does a business owner need to have this level of information as opposed to just hiring and trusting others to do this for them?
Well, it's because we can't always trust the people that we're hiring, right? And it's not always because the people that we're hiring are, being intentionally poor at their job, but sometimes they drop the ball, things get lost. They're not issue spotting things correctly. So we already talked about that. And really, it's just simple things for you to be aware of the issues yourself. So for example, I had a consultation just last week with someone, and we were doing a screen share, and they showed me their tax return from last year, and they cashed out a retirement policy for about $100,000. Well, what a lot of people don't realize is that $100,000 significantly increases your income. In this person's case, it doubled their income. That's going to affect the amount of taxes they should be saving from their business because now they're in a higher tax bracket. And if they didn't really think about that, they wouldn't even bring it to the attention of their tax professional, and their tax professional would not have been able to advise them on it. Mm-hmm. So it's not, sitting down and getting out your calculator and like doing all the math yourself. It's just realizing, oh, this event over here is going to impact this other thing. And this is something that I need to be aware of and look into further.
Right. Well, I mean, we have had many designers on the show and at live events share with us things that have happened to them that have, I mean, high six-figure situations, I mean, high five-figure situations where a bookkeeper was embezzling from them, or one Sherry Dolgen, you know, her CPA made a mistake and it cost her something almost like 50 grand in taxes, and the CPA was like, "Oh, sorry," you know, and it was that part. It's always a combination of, sometimes it's full on fraud and negligent fraud, number one. Sometimes it's that, like, and then sometimes it's negligence. Sometimes it's just like sleep at the wheel, doing 16 clients and not really paying attention to any of them. And then sometimes it's like that, where that CPA was like not a consultative CPA. She probably wasn't engaged for that level of services, but the CPA never said, "Hey, by the way, your business is growing, these are happening." You know, I feel like, you know, when you know that things really can go wrong, and when you realize there really are people who can just make really bad mistakes that cost you money, and there are really bad people who can steal from you, then until you have that awareness, I think it becomes too easy to assume that that professional is going to safeguard you against stuff. And I think what you're providing is around enough broad information with enough layers of details in there to your point. I'm not going to sit there and get my calculator out, but at least I'm now educated on what I should be asking my bookkeeper, my CPA, my tax attorney is really, and unless somebody sits there and lays it all out for us, how do we know what to ask, right?
Right, exactly. And this always reminds me, so I'm a big tennis fan. My husband took me to see Serena Williams at the US Open for my 30th birthday. First time I've been to New York. It was fabulous. And it always makes me remember, I don't know what the context of this was, but in an interview, Serena talks about how she, early in her career, she had an interview with Oprah. And Oprah told her, as one successful woman to another already successful, but going to be very successful woman, the best piece of financial advice I can give you is to always sign your own checks, right? And of course, that's a very specific piece of advice, but we can extrapolate that to a whole bunch of stuff. At the end of the day, you can't solely rely on anyone. Like, you are the boss of your own business. We won't say boss babe. I hate that term. But like, you're the owner of your own company, right? You're the CEO of your own company, which is what I tell people. And all of this stuff, like, I think I often can get really into the weeds on tax tips, legal tips, but what it all really boils down to is building an asset that's going to fund your lifestyle, right? So what are your long-term goals? Do you want to retire? You want to buy your own house, buy a vacation home, whatever. These are the principles and fundamentals that you have to understand to get yourself there. So oftentimes, like I mentioned, I talk about this in a silo, but it's really making some key decisions on protecting the thing that you've created and making certain decisions in order to get yourself to where you want to go.
Well, I mean, the thing is, we all work very hard every day. You know, you running around to the consultations, running around to the site visits, running around to the different suppliers and vendors and trades to do all the stuff. And at the end of the day, if you don't protect what you're creating financially, it's sort of like, why bother, right?
Right. Yeah. I just had this conversation with my mastermind the other day. I was like, I was telling them what I could expect to make as a salary if I just went and got a private job. I was like, sometimes that seems easier. And they were like, but do you actually want to do that? And I say, no, it sounds awful. I'd be so miserable, like stuck lighting all day, right? So we all do what we do for a reason. For me, it has a lot to do with freedom. I just want to be my own boss. But also, you know, we want to reach those end goals. So, you know, anytime I have a hard day, that's what I tell myself. Do I want to go work for someone else? No, I don't. I don't. I'm still loving this.
It's true. It's funny because we had a recent episode with Desi Cresswell on, and Desi talks about, and she is a business coach for designers, specializes in coaching with designers, and she talks about your CEO mindset. She talks about overwhelm, and that's what the most recent episode was about, was getting out of overwhelm. And, you know, we had a little conversation like sometimes you just dream of quitting your business, right? Sometimes you dream of this, but the fact is that 99% of us won't quit our business because of what you just said. At the end of the day, we love being the master of our domain, right? We love being able to call the shots, do it the way we want to do it. We love seeing what we're able to grow and produce. But the other part of that is if we're only doing the fun part and we're not doing the 80% business part, then we are not able to sustain it for our whole life, number one. And I find that if you don't really have it locked down, your finances and your relationships with the people who help you with your finances, and really, for me, it's that fine line between what we're talking about, understanding enough to be a conscious partner in the conversation, but also knowing that I have a professional who literally is thinking about my business even when I'm not. And so it's the marriage of that, right? And then what happens is, because of that, because what happens is, if you don't really have that locked down, how enjoyable is being able to work from, the beach? Because if you're just worried that you don't have your taxes locked down, or you didn't, do this, or you're not sure about that, then it really isn't that fun, I find, right?
Yeah, a vacation with high anxiety is not, not really a vacation.
Right.
The other thing I like to say all the time is, I tell people, you know what, tax and law and money stuff, it might not really be fun. I'm not going to tell you that it is going to be fun, but I can promise it's not going to get any more fun than this. And that's why I put a lot of effort into making my website readable and digestible. I try to do the same thing with my blog and podcast content too, because at the end of the day, I know people did not go into interior design in order to learn about taxes all day. I get that. But let's, we'll strip it back and make it as fun as we can.
Well, you certainly do that. Tell everybody how they find your podcast and your blog and all of that stuff, Braden.
Yeah, so podcast is Unf Your Biz. It's the first word is one word. You got to put the asterisk for the U to find it. If you got kids in the car, you might not want to listen to it with them, although I don't swear quite as much as people probably would think. I also have a Facebook group as well. You can find that by going to bradensbesties.com. It will redirect you there. And then personally, I am most active on Instagram. So if anyone wants to follow me, it's Braden Adam Drake. That's Braden, Adam like the biblical character, Drake like the rapper. That's my full name.
You're a nut. I love it. 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 I love it when I find somebody who's a fun personality, but then the juxtaposition of tax attorney that's a fun personality is just like icing on the cake. So thank you so much, Braden, for being here. Really appreciate your conversation and helping us, try and just navigate through all of this stuff a little bit easier and with a lot more fun. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before I share my observations on Braden and all of his expertise, I want to say to you, if you are listening in real time, that is October 2021, know that LU University starts the week of October 25th, 2021. And we have Peter Lang, the designer CPA, teaching online bookkeeping 201. This is your chance to meet with a CPA every week for 6 weeks, learning how to read the reports on your online accounting system so you can make informed, intelligent decisions about your business and how to manage it for profit. Keep in mind, he's the designer CPA, not the bakery CPA, right? His entire business is built on your business model and how to run it profitably. Go to LuAnnUniversity.com. Don't miss this outstanding opportunity for high-level instruction and interaction with Peter Lang. So, how much of this legal and tax stuff do we really need to spend our time on? How much do we need to know? I feel, my opinion, we need to know enough so that we're no longer afraid or embarrassed by our lack of expertise. That's it. We need to know enough to have a fairly intelligent conversation. All right. We need to get rid of that feeling of not being smart enough in this area. We need to stop nodding our heads and saying we get something if we don't. We need to stop replying, no, I don't have any more questions, when we really have 10 more questions. And the first one is, can you kind of start at the beginning again? I didn't get it. Right. That fear and embarrassment has to stop. I don't even know how it got started. It doesn't make any logical sense. I don't know about you, but I didn't go to school to learn tax law. I'm not an expert in that field. So why do we feel embarrassed when we don't fully understand it? You know, we are experts at what we do, right? So think about that. We are experts at what we do. Say that to yourself. I am an expert, right? And if you don't remember anything else from this episode, remember to hold on to that confidence each time you have a conversation with your CPA, your attorney, or anyone else from your professional dream team. All right? We can equip ourselves with knowledge of business taxes and S Corps, and we should. But the point is, if you're not there yet, I suggest that you listen to Braden's podcast or go back to episodes on this podcast with Peter Lang. And remember, as you listen, you appreciate their knowledge and expertise, but you too are a professional, okay? So anyone that doesn't regard you in that way, you need to move on. You need to move on and find someone who will. All right, now, you want to be able to have an overall sense of how things work so that no one can cause problems for your business through intentional wrongdoing, negligence, or honest mistakes, okay? And on the other side of the coin, we also want to learn a few things so that we know the impact our actions have on the health of our business and our bank account. As Braden says, you are the CEO of your own company, and you need to understand the fundamentals of that business so that you can get yourself where you want to go. And I'll add, so that you can protect yourself and what you are working so hard for in the first place. And I'll just say, if you're willing to put work into your business in return for additional profit on a project, consider working with Revelwoods to educate yourself on flooring so you can cut out the middleman and sell directly. Help your clients get the right floor for their style. Go to revelwoods.com to learn more about how to add this other very profitable layer of product to your projects, okay? Now, what about adding layers of protection to your business? We talked about how educating ourselves in order to protect and empower ourselves, but Braden also suggests we put foundational layers of protection on our business. He suggests that we make sure we have insurance, contracts, we have our legal entity registered. For insurance, he suggested general liability insurance and professional liability insurance. As for filing your status, your tax status, his rule of thumb is that once you have about a $30,000 difference between your profit and your salary, it may make sense to move your tax status to an S Corp. Of course, you need to talk to your own CPA about this, right? And I love that Braden made a point about what to expect from your CPA. He reminded us that you get what you pay for. Many times, a CPA's business model doesn't include custom solutions, or it may be available for an additional fee. I think it's good to keep in mind, and you may want to check what your agreement with your CPA includes, all right? And if you're still thinking you're not really sure, you need to bother with this stuff because you already have a pro doing it for you, or you've got someone internally handling it for you, well, I have some homework for you. You must go back and listen to Taylor Spellman's episode number 467. I'm just going to say you must. If you are not sure that you need to be the steward of your financial health, of your business, go listen to number 467. I promise you it will make you think again. All righty. I also want to give a big shout out to Kathleen Anderson, who is teaching Online Bookkeeping 101. All right. So if you are very new to your journey of understanding your money and getting control of your money journey, we have you covered at Lu University. Both Online Bookkeeping 101 and 201, along with a half a dozen others, are open for registration and kick off next week. Especially, like I said, you have to be listening to this in real time, October 22nd, all right? If you are interested in taking charge and learning the things you know that you need to know to be profitable and efficient and at the top of your game, then Lu University is for you. Check it out, LuAnnUniversity.com. All right, thank you for joining me today and for being a part of this amazing community. Love, love, love that you show up every week, and I just appreciate you so much. Decide to be excellent. Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at LuAnnNigara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.